And this is another part, inheritance, the last one, right? It's not wasiya now. This is the actual inheritance rules that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it fixed. It's precisely determined. Nobody has a right to change this. You only have the right for that 1/3. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala again made sure that these percentages and fractions that is mentioned, to make sure that it's fair and just and nobody fights among each other. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by the way, is the one who knows the best. He is the one who decides what fraction is appropriate for somebody. Some people say that, hey, it doesn't look correct to me. Why a female get 1 part and men get 2 part? That is again decided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We don't have any say in that. We will discuss the wisdom that scholars give, why it is in the ratio of 1:2. But at the end, whether we understand or not, we have to just take it. So these rules, there are 4 or 5 verses in Quran that most of the rules are derived from. But apart from that, there are a lot of ahadith that Rasulullah gave us, and that gives a lot of indication. Plus, some of them are, in complicated cases, we need to refer to the fatwas of scholars as well. You're not going to get into too complicated parts, but just a very basic part. So there are Quran, Sunnah are the basic places where we get these rules. Plus, there are some ijtihad of some scholars for certain specific situations. And pre-Islamic practices, in the time before Islam, and many cultures, and not just Islam, people, the women especially, they were deprived of inheritance. Even the Christian world and many other countries, they were like, women, they don't deserve money. And in fact, at that time, Islam came, and it was the religion who said that no, women have a share. You cannot deprive women. And that's the time, women's status was elevated because of Islam, because earlier there was no place where this inheritance was given to women. So that's how Islam raised the honor of women. And sometimes, you end up, pre-Islamic practices, you end up giving share to somebody who don't deserve it. Like, for example, we will discuss that an adopted son or a daughter cannot get any part of your inheritance. So this is again a rule or a law established by in Islam. You can give wasiyah, but from inheritance you cannot give. So that's another thing. And again, this rules, the ilm al-fara'id, that's what it's called in the books, ilm al-fara'id, the study of the injunctions concerning the inheritance. This is something. And again, this one, all these rulings that we are learning, it's for the kifaya, right? It's something, it's a communal obligation. Some people in the community must know it, otherwise people will be liable. Again, we are not here to give fatwas or anything, but we should have at least basic knowledge. We should have at least basic knowledge, or at least have some indication that this sounds wrong, let's refer to Sheikh. And so brothers and sisters who pray 5 times a day, I think there is some basic knowledge that you should know. All right. And by the way, this one famous Sahabi that was considered expert, what is his name? Was famous for knowing rules of inheritance. The Rasulullah ﷺ specifically mentioned Zayd ibn Thabit. Yeah, even Aisha radiallahu anha was very smart when it came to inheritance, but Rasulullah ﷺ, he said the best in fara'id is Zayd ibn Thabit. That's a Sahih hadith in Tirmidhi. So his name was very popular. Let's look at another thing, the estate of the deceased. So it's just not the bank balance that we say that, okay, this is how he had in bank and this is how we're going to calculate inheritance. There are many things that you need to know. In general, anything of value that we have, that becomes part of inheritance, okay? Anything of value. So it can be a cash back account, safety boxes, you have to inquire. So, you have to ask the banks, did this person have safety boxes? Many people store jewelry and important material there. You have to ask these things. And houses, land, properties, of course, and the cars and animals even. And debts from people. So you have to make sure that if this person had debts or not, ask about it and see the documentation if you have any, and trusts from people, find out who owed money to this person. And even little things like clothes, books, this can have value. If he had a library or something, it can be thousands of dollars, and one of your relative is very poor, it means a big thing to him. Like few dollars can mean big thing to that relative, so cannot neglect. So if we will discuss this, some person might be appointed to distribute it. So if you are appointed as that person, then you have to be careful. You have to make sure all these things are taken care of, right? And copyrights and rights to build on a land. So there are a lot of complicated things we don't need to get into, but these are the basic things. Again, you have to remember that this wealth, all these things, doesn't belong to that person, it belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So anything, even $1 value, we have to be very careful. It is Allah's wealth, ma lillah, right, as the Quran says. So this needs to be distributed according to how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked us to spend. When we distribute this wealth to our relatives, based on whatever rules we find from Quran and Sunnah, we have to make sure that there are few people who cannot get any wealth, any portion from that wealth. Who are these people, and why are we not supposed to give to those people? Now we are specifically talking about inheritance, not wasiyah. Inheritance is the one that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in Quran, and we have it from a hadith. And some of this applies to wasiyah as well. Let's look. So the first one is spouse from secret marriage. So if anybody gets married and he doesn't have any documentation, sometimes even even there is no witnesses even, and sometimes there is no documentation even from the masjid, forget about the state. So if you don't even have that, then that marriage was legally, Islamically, it's not accepted even, right? You need to have certain conditions. So even though they were living together and everybody knew they were wife, but since he didn't have proper documentation, that spouse is not given the wealth, part of the wealth, the share. And the other one, adopted child. This is very important. Many people adopt a son or a daughter. You can call them son or a daughter, but when it comes to money, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala specifically mentioned many verses that they cannot get even a single dollar from your wealth. If you really love them, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made a way. What's the way? How can you give them wealth after you die? Wasiyah. 1/3 you have, all that you can specify how much money you want to give. But inheritance, no way. All those fractions and shares, it's fixed. It cannot change at all. An ex-wife. So you got divorced, and the iddah period ends, and now, this sometimes we have seen these cases where Islamically, husband and wife get divorced after 3 months or whatever, a pronunciation of divorce, they get it's all over. But in according to state, you're still husband and wife, and now they didn't complete the paperwork, right? So now when they die, the wife can claim that I was his wife, I need my share, right? She can fight in the court and she'll get the money. But Islam says no, if the iddah has passed, there is no money for that wife. So ex-wife doesn't have any share in the wealth. And then illegitimate child. So some people, especially in this country, when they come here, they don't really care about marriages. They say that, hey, it's so much of headache, and why go that route? Let's live together. So a man and a woman live together, they have children, and everything goes like a family, but neither by state-wise or by Islamically, they are not considered husband and wife. Whatever the child they have, even though you called him your son or a daughter, you don't give a single dollar to that person. It's not possible because they are illegitimate child. They are not qualified to get any portion of your inheritance. And the killer or the murderer also doesn't get anything.
Even if his son.
Yeah. In fact, Rasulullah ﷺ said in a Sahih hadith from al-Bayhaqi, a killer does not receive any part of the inheritance. So this happens many times, right? We hear these stories like there's son and father and even uncle and nephew. The uncle writes in a will that if I die, all my wealth should go to my nephew, right? And the nephew is like, oh, I don't want to wait 10 years until he dies. Why don't I just go and kill him? I'll become a millionaire, right? That's a shortcut. So Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he said that if it is found out that this person killed this person, the one who died, then that's it. He cannot get any inheritance. And in fact, it becomes scary. Sometimes what happens is, it can be an accident, right? I didn't mean to kill, and I was going in a car and I hit that person, and that happened to be a person whom I'm inheriting from. The scholar said that no, in order to close all loopholes, even if it was an accident, you get nothing. You get nothing. It's so strict about it. So, and as the brother said, even if it's a son who killed his father, no share at all. Absolutely no share. This applies, by the way, killer murder, both to wasiya and also the inheritance. Okay? Everything, yeah. But in adopted child case, you can give wasiya, wealth from wasiya, but not from inheritance. This is like outside person. And again, the last one that we have is non-Muslim. So Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam made it clear. It goes both the way. Non-Muslims cannot inherit from a deceased Muslim, and a non-Muslim deceased person, they cannot give as inheritance to a Muslim. So it's only within Islam. Both the inheritor and the deceased person have to be in the same religion. So otherwise they are not qualified. And Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he clearly mentioned a kafir cannot inherit from a Muslim, nor a Muslim from a kafir. That's a hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari. And this is very problematic in this country, especially these brothers and sisters who convert to Islam, right? And their parents are like probably very, very well off, and now the parents die. Now they converted to Islam and they are kind of deprived of that wealth because their parents didn't follow Islam, right? So that's really a problem. But the rules are rules. Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam mentioned it that you cannot inherit. But again, the same thing. If you want to really give to your, if you are a Muslim and if your father is a non-Muslim, you really love him, how do you give wealth? Wasiya. Give wasiya. You can mention in that 1/3 part that I want some portion of it to be given to my non-Muslim father. That is allowed. But in inheritance, the 2/3 part, you have no say at all. That's fixed. No non-Muslims allowed in that part.